Rivka was 79 years old when she walked into my office in Jerusalem with laboratory results that made no sense. Her fasting glucose was 92, normal. Her HbA1c, the 3-month average of her blood sugar, was 5.4%. That's not just non-diabetic. That's the glucose control of a healthy person half her age. Except 6 months earlier, her results had told a different story entirely. 6 months earlier, she had been what we call a brittle diabetic. Her fasting glucose was running 180, 190, sometimes over 200. Her HbA1c was 8.1%. She was on metformin, the standard first-line medication for type 2 diabetes. She was on a sulfonylurea. She was on a statin for her cholesterol. And despite all of that, her blood sugar was completely uncontrolled. I asked her what had changed. I asked about her diet. She said her diet was the same. I asked about exercise. She said she walked the same amount as always, maybe a little more, but nothing dramatic. I asked if she'd had some kind of acute illness that had resolved, which can sometimes temporarily improve glucose control. She said no. Then I asked the question that changed everything. I said, "Rivka, what's different?" And she told me something that I, a cardiologist with 40 years of experience and a lifetime of medical training, had never heard as an explanation for metabolic transformation. She said, "Doctor, I stopped being angry." Now, at this point in my career, I've learned not to dismiss anything that a patient tells me. I've learned that the most profound wisdom often comes from people who aren't trying to sound wise. So I asked her to explain. And what she told me over the next 30 minutes changed how I understand the relationship between emotion and physiology. It's a relationship that modern medicine treats as secondary, as though your feelings are a minor factor in your health. But in reality, your emotions are primary. They're the foundation. And if you don't address them, you can't fix your body no matter how many medications you take. Rivka's story began 51 years earlier, when she married a man named Yosef. They had been together for 51 years. They had raised 3 children together. They had built a life together. But Yosef had been diagnosed with severe emphysema 15 years into their marriage, and the last 36 years of his life had been a slow decline. He was on oxygen. He couldn't work. He couldn't travel. He couldn't do the things they had planned to do together. And Rivka had spent those 36 years as a caregiver. She had spent 36 years watching the man she loved slowly disappear. And underneath all of that caregiving, underneath all of the logistics of managing his illness, there was a river of anger. She was angry at the unfairness. She was angry at the loss of the life they were supposed to have. She was angry at Yosef for getting sick, which she knew was irrational, but the anger was there anyway. She was angry at God. She was angry at the medical system that could keep him alive, but couldn't make him well. And she never addressed any of that anger. She never talked about it. She never processed it. In Jewish culture, in her generation, you didn't do that. You carried it. You did your duty. You endured. And that's what Rivka did. Yosef died when he was 83. Rivka was 74. And the day after his funeral, her body began to fail. Within 6 months, she developed type 2 diabetes. Within a year, her blood pressure was elevated. Within 2 years, she had developed neuropathy, nerve damage, in her feet. The doctors couldn't understand why her condition was progressing so rapidly. She was compliant with her medications. Her lifestyle hadn't changed, but her body was deteriorating at an accelerated rate. What was happening inside Rivka's body is something that modern endocrinology is only beginning to understand, though my grandfather Mordechai understood it intuitively 70 years ago. When you carry chronic, unprocessed anger and grief, your nervous system exists in a state of constant activation. Your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, is chronically engaged. This means your cortisol is elevated, your adrenaline is elevated, your inflammatory markers are elevated, Your body is in a state of constant low-level emergency, and when your body is in that state, your glucose control fails. Your insulin sensitivity drops. Your cells stop responding to insulin properly because your nervous system is telling your body, we're under threat. We need to be ready to run or fight, store glucose, store fat, prepare for danger. Your metabolism shifts into a survival mode that made sense when humans faced actual predators, but makes no sense when the danger is purely emotional. The glucose piles up in your bloodstream because your cells aren't taking it up. Your pancreas works harder and harder to produce more insulin to force the glucose in, and eventually your pancreas becomes exhausted and you become diabetic. This is not theoretical. This is physiology. The pathway is through the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, which connects your brain directly to your hormonal system. Chronic stress, chronic anger, chronic unprocessed grief activates this axis. It elevates cortisol. Cortisol increases hepatic glucose production. Your liver starts making glucose. Cortisol decreases insulin sensitivity. Your cells stop responding to insulin. The result is diabetes. Rivka didn't understand any of this. All she knew was that 5 years after Yosef's death, she was on 3 medications. Her diabetes was worsening, and she felt hollow. She told me this with remarkable clarity. She said, I realized one day that I had been angry for so long that I didn't remember what not being angry felt like. The anger had become my identity. Without it, I didn't know who I was. And that's when something happened. She was at a Shabbat service, the Jewish weekly Sabbath service, and the rabbi was talking about a passage from the Talmud. The passage is from Tractate Sanhedrin, and it discusses something called teshuvah, repentance or return. But the rabbi was interpreting it not as religious conversion, but as a return to yourself, a return to the person you were before pain distorted you. And Rivka had an insight. She realized that her anger wasn't serving her. It wasn't bringing Yosef back. It wasn't making her life better. It was only destroying her. And the person it was destroying was her. She made a decision that day, a simple one. Every morning before she got out of bed, she would say 3 words. In Hebrew they were Ani machila, Ani machila, Ani machila. In English, it translates roughly to I forgive, I forgive, I forgive. She wasn't forgiving in any formal sense. She wasn't saying she was okay with what had happened. She wasn't minimizing her loss. What she was doing was releasing the anger. She was telling her nervous system, it's safe now. You don't have to be in emergency mode. She was telling her body, I'm going to let this go. She did this every single morning for 3 months. Just those 3 words, spoken aloud in her bedroom while still lying in bed. 3 words. Ani machila. I forgive. Not forgiving anyone specifically, just forgiving, releasing, letting go. Within 2 weeks, she noticed her sleep improved. She was sleeping more deeply. She would wake up and realize she hadn't had the usual tension in her shoulders. Within 3 weeks, she noticed her appetite had normalized. Within a month, her fasting glucose readings had begun to decline. Not dramatically at first, but steadily declining. Within 6 weeks, her readings had dropped from the 170 to 190 range to the 130 to 140 range. Within 3 months, they had dropped to normal levels. I asked her if she had changed anything else. She said no. Same diet, same exercise, same medications initially. After a month, she asked her doctor if she could reduce her medications since her glucose was improving. Her doctor was skeptical, but agreed to reduce her metformin dose. Her glucose stayed normal. Then she asked about reducing her other medications. Her doctor reduced those too. Within 6 months, she was off all her diabetes medications. She had reversed her diabetes not through any medication, not through any expensive intervention, but through 3 words spoken every morning. Now, I need to be very clear about something. I'm not saying that saying these words will magically cure diabetes. I'm not saying that all you need to do is forgive and your pancreas will heal itself. That's not how physiology works. What I'm saying is that chronic, unprocessed emotional stress damages your metabolic system. And when you address that emotional stress, when you release it, your body can begin to heal. The capacity for that healing was always there. The medications weren't unlocking it. The medications were just managing the symptoms while the underlying emotional cause was still active. What Rivka was doing, whether she understood it this way or not, was regulating her nervous system. She was sending a signal to her brain that the emergency was over. She was allowing her parasympathetic nervous system to activate. That's the rest and digest system, the system that's opposite to fight or flight. When your parasympathetic system is active, your cortisol drops, your inflammation drops, your insulin sensitivity improves, your cells start responding to insulin again, your glucose normalizes. The Talmud teaches something in Tractate Nadarim about the power of the spoken word. The sages understood, thousands of years ago, that when you speak something aloud, it's not just sound. It creates a neurological signal. It affects your own nervous system. When you say, "I forgive," aloud, your brain hears it. Your autonomic nervous system responds. You're literally reprogramming your physiology through the act of speaking. I had another patient, a man named Abraham from Tel Aviv, who was 68 years old when he came to me with uncontrolled hypertension. His blood pressure was running 160/100, consistently. He was on 3 blood pressure medications, and his pressure still wasn't controlled. His wife had left him 20 years earlier, and he had never fully processed that loss. He had constructed a narrative in which he was the victim, in which she was the villain, in which the world had wronged him, and he carried that narrative with him every day. His body was expressing that bitterness. His blood vessels were constricted. His sympathetic nervous system was constantly activated. His blood pressure was the physical manifestation of his emotional state. I didn't tell him to take another medication. I asked him a question. I said, "Abraham, what would it take for you to forgive her?" He looked at me like I was insane. He said, "She left me. She abandoned me. Why would I forgive her?" And I said, "Not for her sake, for your sake. Your bitterness is killing you. Your body is expressing it. You can either carry this anger to your grave, or you can put it down." He didn't do it immediately, but after several months, after I had repeated this conversation, after his blood pressure had gotten even worse despite medication increases, he decided to try. Not the same practice as Rivka. He developed his own. Every morning, he would write a letter to his ex-wife. He wouldn't send it. He would just write it. He would write everything he was angry about, everything he felt she had taken from him, everything he grieved. And then he would write, "I release this. I forgive you. I forgive myself." And he would throw the letter away. After 2 months, his blood pressure began to normalize. After 4 months, he was able to reduce one of his medications. After 6 months, he was able to reduce another. After a year, his blood pressure was controlled on a single medication, and his doctor was shocked. His doctor attributed it to the medication adjustment. But Abraham knew better. He knew that something fundamental had shifted in his body when he released the anger. This is the thing that modern medicine doesn't want to acknowledge. It's not profitable. You can't patent forgiveness. You can't charge someone for a prescription that says, "Release your anger every morning." But it works. It works because your emotions and your physiology are not separate. They're completely integrated. Your vagus nerve, this major nerve that runs from your brain all the way down through your body, it's like a superhighway of communication between your emotional brain and your body. When your emotional brain is in distress, when you're carrying anger and grief, that signal travels down the vagus nerve and affects every organ system. Your heart rate increases, your digestion shuts down, your immune function suppresses, your glucose control fails. But when you release that emotional state, when you tell your brain, "It's safe, let it go," That signal reverses. Your parasympathetic system activates. Your heart rate normalizes. Your digestion restarts. Your immune function improves. Your glucose normalizes. My grandfather Mordecai used to say something that I didn't understand until I was much older. He said, "The body keeps the score of the heart." He meant that whatever emotional wounds you carry, whatever you don't process, your body will express it. He had seen enough suffering in his lifetime to understand this deeply. He had learned it not from medical textbooks, but from watching people. People who carried trauma in their bodies, people whose diseases had emotional roots. Now, I want to tell you about another patient, because Rivka's case is not unique. A woman named Rachel from London, 64 years old, came to me with what's called metabolic syndrome. She had elevated blood pressure, elevated triglycerides, high fasting glucose, excess abdominal fat, the whole constellation of metabolic dysfunction. She had been bullied terribly as a child, and she had never forgiven the people who bullied her. In fact, she had spent decades reliving those experiences in her mind. She would think about things that people had said to her in high school, and the anger would come roaring back as though it had just happened. Her body was living in a state of chronic threat. I suggested to her that she try a practice of forgiveness, not to excuse what had been done to her, but to release the hold it had on her nervous system. She was skeptical, but she did it. She spent time, intentionally, bringing to mind the people who had hurt her, and she said, out loud, "I forgive you, not because what you did was okay, but because I'm releasing the hold this has on my life." She did this once a day for 3 months. Her blood pressure normalized. Her triglycerides dropped from 280 to 160. Her fasting glucose normalized. Her weight began to normalize. She lost 15 pounds without changing her diet or exercise. Her body healed when her nervous system was finally allowed to relax. The medical system calls this the mind-body connection, as though it's some kind of alternative medicine or New Age concept. But it's not. It's neurology. It's endocrinology. It's documented physiology. The problem is that it doesn't make money for anyone. You can't get insurance reimbursement for teaching people to forgive. You can't sell forgiveness. So it doesn't get taught. Instead, you get another diabetes medication. I want to tell you something directly. If you're sitting with me right now and you have diabetes, or high blood pressure, or heart disease, or autoimmune disease, any of the major chronic diseases that plague modern life, there's probably an emotional component to it. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because you're human. And humans carry things, losses, betrayals, unfulfilled expectations, grief. And if you don't process those things, your body will hold them for you. The symptoms of metabolic disease are your body's way of saying, something is wrong in your emotional world. Something needs to be resolved. The medication treats the symptom, but if you want to actually heal, you have to address the root. And the root is almost always emotional. Rivka came back to see me a year after her glucose had normalized. She wasn't on any diabetes medication. Her glucose was perfect. Her blood pressure was normal without medication. She had lost weight. She looked different. She looked lighter. And I asked her how she was doing beyond the medical metrics. She told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Doctor, I realized that the anger was keeping Yosef alive in my mind. As long as I was angry about losing him, I was still in relationship with him. When I forgave him, when I released the anger, I had to finally say goodbye. And that was the hardest part. But after I said goodbye, I got my life back, and I got my body back." This is the thing about grief and anger. They feel like a connection to the person we've lost. They feel like if we let go of the anger, we're betraying them. We're saying it's okay what happened. But that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is freedom. It's releasing the other person from your judgment, which frees you from the burden of carrying that judgment. Here's what I want you to do. Over the next week, think about what you're carrying. Is there someone you haven't forgiven? Is there a loss you haven't processed? Is there anger that's been part of your identity for so long that you don't remember life without it? And then, I want you to try something. Pick a phrase. It could be the same as Rivka's. It could be something else, something that resonates with you. And every morning, before you get out of bed, say it 3 times, out loud, not in your head, out loud. Let your nervous system hear it. I forgive, I forgive, I forgive. Or, I release this, I release this, I release this. Or, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. Something that tells your body that the emergency is over. And do this every single day, for at least 3 months. Don't expect an immediate miracle, but pay attention. Notice if your sleep improves. Notice if your appetite changes. Notice if your energy shifts. Notice if your inflammation markers improve. Notice if your glucose control improves, because it will. I've documented all of this, the neurology, the endocrinology, the specific practices that have worked for my patients, in a comprehensive guide that I've written based on 40 years of practice. It includes not just forgiveness practices, but specific ways to identify what emotional material you're carrying, how to process it safely, and how to use your nervous system to heal your body. The link is in the description below. But here's what I want you to understand most of all. Your body is not your enemy. Your disease is not a random misfortune. Your body is trying to tell you something. It's expressing something that your conscious mind hasn't fully acknowledged. And if you listen to it, if you understand what it's saying, you can heal. Not just manage symptoms, actually heal. Rivka is 84 now. She's been off all her diabetes medication for 5 years. Her glucose remains normal. Her blood pressure remains normal. She travels. She has energy. She has a relationship with her 2 remaining grandchildren that brings her joy. And when I ask her how she's doing, she doesn't talk about her labs. She talks about her life. She talks about how light she feels, how free. And she tells me that she thinks Yosef would be proud of her, that she's finally living the life they were supposed to have together, even though she's living it alone. The Talmud teaches in Tractate Yoma that on the Day of Atonement, God forgives you for the wrongs you've committed against God, but God cannot forgive you for the wrongs you've committed against another human being. Only that human being can forgive you, but you can forgive yourself, and you can forgive others. And when you do, when you release the hold that anger and resentment have on your nervous system, your body responds, your physiology shifts, your metabolism normalizes. You get your life back. This is not alternative medicine. This is not metaphysical. This is neurology. This is endocrinology. This is documented physiology. And it's been understood by wise people, by rabbis and healers of souls, for thousands of years. Modern medicine is only now catching up to what the ancients knew. If you're willing to try this, if you're willing to speak 3 words every morning and see what happens to your body over 3 months, you might be amazed at what you discover. You might discover that the disease you thought was permanent, the medication you thought you'd need forever, was actually just your body's way of asking you to release something you were carrying. And when you release it, your body can finally heal. My grandfather used to say, the greatest healer is not the doctor. It's the person who finally says, enough, I'm letting this go. That person heals themselves. And he was right. Rivka healed herself. Abraham healed himself. Rachel healed herself. Not through medication, through the simple act of releasing anger and choosing forgiveness. You can do the same. Your body is waiting for you to give it permission to be well.